Some of you may know the story of Charles Blondet, the French acrobat who tight-roped across the Niagara Falls in the 1850s. He did it multiple times. He did it blindfolded. He did it on stilts. And one time, midway through, he stopped to cook an omelet. Each time, crowds gathered to watch, and they were amazed at what they saw. One day, he wheeled a wheelbarrow across the tightrope, and after reaching the other side, he turned to the crowd and asked, "Do you believe I can do it again?" And the crowd cheered, "Yes, yes!" To which Blondet responded, "Then who will get in the wheelbarrow?" It's easy to cheer from the sidelines. It's harder to climb when the rope is swaying and the future is uncertain. This summer, we're going to journey through the Gospel of Luke, what's called the travel narrative, as Jesus sets his eyes towards Jerusalem and events that we will remember each year during Holy Week. This is the beginning of this process, and we're going to consider what discipleship means. And today, I want to look at what it costs us. This summer, we're not just going to ask, what do you believe? But we're going to ask, where is Jesus calling you in the wheelbarrow? Where are you being encouraged to trust Jesus a little more deeply in your life? Today, we see these two pivotal moments. First, in the Hebrew Scriptures, this turning point, this transition of ministry. Elijah, this great prophet, is nearing the end of his life. His student and his successor, Elisha, who's been with him all along, has been following him closely as they move from Gilgal to Bethel to Jericho, and he has been by his side. And even though Elisha does not really know what's to come, he's got some sense that something big wants to happen. When Elijah is taken up in a whirlwind, we're told that Elisha tears his garments, a symbol of grief and surrender. And then he picks up the cloak, his teacher's mantle, and he strikes the Jordan River, and it parts miraculously. But it's important to note, all of this is preceded by some faithful steps that Elisha has been taking. Elisha could have retreated in fear, but he stays close. He stays near Elijah, and he watches his mentor closely, particularly as his mentor faces death. Elisha is willing to let go and to surrender and to open himself, and Elisha is willing to step forward with trust. But can you imagine standing by the river with the cloak, the mantle in hand, no Elijah, no voice, no plan B, just the memory of your mentor and this call to step forward into leadership? This is his get in the wheelbarrow moment. In Luke, we come to another turning point in the gospel. Jesus knows that his end is near, and he's trying to raise up disciples that will carry forward his message. And Luke writes, when the days drew near for him to be taken up, Jesus sets his face to go to Jerusalem. He's no longer wandering. He's no longer that itinerant preacher. He is resolute. He knows where he has to go. He knows that it will be a place of suffering and betrayal and death, and yet he goes anyway. He goes to Jerusalem anyway. And then there's these three really strange encounters. Jesus comes off incredibly harsh, doesn't he? But each statement, I think, is an invitation. Each response, I think, gives us a window into the human heart, into our heart. And each exchange helps us to see the cost of following Jesus. The first would-be disciple says to Jesus, "I will follow you wherever you go." Reminds us a little bit of Peter, right? I'll do whatever. I promise. I'm all in. And Jesus says, well, foxes have hole and birds of the air have nests, but I have nowhere to lay my head. I think he's saying, you can follow me, but it isn't going to be safe. It's not going to be comfortable. I think Jesus is inviting this disciple to consider whether he is willing to risk being uncomfortable. Is he willing to risk letting go of control? The second would-be disciple says something seemingly reasonable. Can I first bury my father? And Jesus says, let the dead bury their own dead, which I think is his way of saying discipleship reorders our priorities in life. And he's asking this disciple, would-be disciple, are you willing to be disappointing to your family in following me? The third would-be disciple, again, pretty reasonable. Can I say goodbye to my family? And Jesus says, no one who puts his hand on the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of heaven. I think he's saying discipleship is not found back there. It's not about going back to the past. It's about moving into the future with trust, with faith, even when it's uncertain. Jesus is asking him, are you willing to let go of the familiar in order to follow me into the unknown? As harsh as these exchanges seem to be, I don't think they're condemnations, they're invitations. Each would-be disciple is being invited into the wheelbarrow. And each offers an excuse. Not now, I'm not ready. Maybe when things settle down a little bit. Sound familiar? Our words might be different, but that hesitation, I think we all know. That hesitation to follow is the same. So what about you? Where are you being invited into the wheelbarrow? Is it a relationship in your life that you know needs to change and you just haven't made that decision in your heart and had that conversation? Is it an opportunity that's before you and it just feels a little too risky and you haven't said yes, even though something's happening inside you? Is it an invitation to give a little bit more, to stretch and maybe live with a little bit less in your life? Is it a challenge to reorder your life so that faith is at the center, not on the margins? Sometimes these wheelbarrow moments are dramatic, like in the King's text today, but sometimes they're just very subtle, very ordinary. Sometimes it's just the decision to tell the truth, even when it's hard. Sometimes it's the decision to be honest, even when it's unpopular. Sometimes it's trusting God even when the path isn't abundantly clear. Sometimes it's learning to be a little bit more comfortable being uncomfortable. Sometimes it's saying yes when you want to say maybe. Let me think about it. Sometimes it's feeling the fear and doing it anyway. It's like Elisha standing by that river with a mantle and a memory. It's being willing to step out, not knowing how it's all going to work out. Or those disciples who are being invited to release something familiar in order to open up into something unfamiliar. Or these disciples who are invited to let go of good things, important things, but not the most essential. What if faith is not about having everything figured out, having all the answers? What if this is faith, stepping forward even when it feels risky and uncertain? What if it does mean letting go of something that's been good in order to be open to something that will be better? What if it is ultimately about stepping into these uncharted places in our lives with openness and vulnerability and willingness? You don't have to be fearless. You just have to say, yeah, yes. You just have to trust the one who leads, even when that wheelbarrow feels wobbly and the future doesn't seem so secure, because the beginning of the call is always happening, as Liz was reminding us last week, and the way is already opening, and the only thing that needs to happen is your yes. Can you feel that in your life? Is there a place where this is speaking to something that you're wrestling with today? I always love poetry, and I turn to the poets that I trust, and John O'Donohue says this as well as anybody I've ever read. about what these moments are like in his poem, For a New Beginning. This is how he puts it. He says, "In out-of-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you have outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? And then the delight. When your courage kindled and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you, though your destination is not yet clear. You can trust the promise of this opening. You can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. That's discipleship. Not certainty, but availability, willingness, trust. Not safety and security, but presence with purpose. May we each have the courage to get in the wheelbarrow and let Jesus lead us to where he wants us to go. Amen.